session.
Okay.
Okay, very good. So let me, this session is also being recorded because we place it on our website for the faculty and students from all the HBCUs to have access to.
Okay.
All right. Hello and welcome to the National HBCU Blockchain webinar series brought to you by Morgan FinTech Center. My name is Ali Emdad. I'm the Associate Dean at the Graves School of Business at Morgan and the founder and director of the FinTech Center at Morgan State University. Today, the format is an interview with Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett from the U.S. Virgin Islands, and followed by about 40-minute Q&A session. I have the honor and pleasure to present our guest, who certainly doesn't need any introduction. Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett represents the at-large district of the U.S. Virgin Islands in the United States House of Representatives. Congresswoman Plaskett is best known for her understanding of economic development and public-private partnership. She previously worked at the Justice Department as counsel to the Assistant Attorney General of the Civil Division, where she worked on initiatives to increase the number of minority and women attorneys at the Justice Department. She relocated to her ancestral home of the United States Virgin Islands and worked with the Virgin Islands Economic Development Authority, or VEDA. At VEDA, she worked on tax incentive programs and public-private partnerships as a means to bring economic growth to the development of the authority. In her own words, as young women of color, our participation in the civic process through leadership and other roles is critical to ensuring our interests are represented and the long-standing issues affecting our communities are addressed. Congresswoman, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. And I just want to start with a very general question is, your role, you are a member of the Congressional Blockchain Caucus. How did it start? How did the group get together?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me and having this really timely and important discussion. The Congressional Blockchain Caucus was founded, excuse me, several Congresses ago. We have 2-year sessions that make up a Congress. This is now the 117th Congress. And in the 114th Congress, which happened to be my first term as a member of Congress, the Congressional Blockchain Caucus was founded. It's a bipartisan, meaning both Republican and Democratic group of members of Congress and staff who believe in the future of blockchain technology and understand that Congress has a role to play in that development. The caucus is a platform for industry and government to come together to study and understand the implications of blockchain technology. And the caucus is in the early days of this technology, and we feel that it's paramount that Congress be a bridge between the industry and government to foster collaboration and ensure competitiveness on the global stage. At the time that I became a member of the Blockchain Caucus, I was the first woman and the first African-American to join the Blockchain Caucus back then.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, thank you. We had, last year, we had another member of the caucus joining us, and that was Congressman Davidson. Now to another question, which is an important one. Why is it taking so long to regulate this market?
Sure. Well, there's several layers to that, right? Though most companies are regulated at a state level as either a money service business or a money transmitter, there are additional steps that the federal government can take to ensure that the ecosystem is safe and secure. In most instances, as we see with new technologies, Congress usually lags behind in understanding these new innovations and really having the bandwidth to be able to keep up and to regulate. So in the 117th Congress, there are crypto bills that have been introduced that provide some sort of regulatory framework. HR 1602, which is the Eliminate Barriers to Innovation Act, it directs the Commodity Future Trade Commission and the Securities and Exchange Commission to jointly establish a digital asset working group and write reports, including the legal and regulatory framework and related developments in the United States relating to digital assets and development in other countries that impact related to identification of how these developments impact the competitive position of the United States. And you'll see that that bill has both Democrat as well as Republican sponsors for it. Warren Davidson, who you talked about, a Republican from Ohio, is one of the co-sponsors of that piece of legislation. I have been really advocating for a sandbox framework, which is similar to what is in England right now. Well, because this is a new technology, we don't want to stifle it, but at the same time, we want to ensure that it's safe, that others are allowed to play in the sandbox, if you will, so that individuals who are new, minorities, those who may not have the scale to be able to compete with the larger players have the ability to compete. And like a sandbox, Congress and other regulatory agencies can act more as adults to monitor what is happening there within and allow it to develop and grow on its own without over-regulation, but at the same time, making sure that there's competitiveness and fairness and equity in the creation so that the capitalism can work in that respect. So that's the area that I have been an advocate for, that I think we should be working on here in the United States. And, as we continue to have discussions about this, we'll see where Congress lands. What did you think of that? Have you looked at all, Professor, at the what's going on in London, and what are your thoughts about what they've done?
Yes, many of the other countries actually are moving ahead faster, at a faster pace than the US is doing currently. China is moving with a lot of regulation. So many innovative companies in the US are concerned about the lack of clarity in the process. And therefore, there is a potential for some of these top innovative companies may move to other countries to be able to sustain their businesses.
Sure, so that they can have some level of certainty as they're planning and putting large amounts of funding into the R&D portion of this and to expand. We understand, those of us, particularly in the blockchain caucus, understand this and want to create some clarity, and as well as creating a framework, but not being so overly regulated that it doesn't allow innovation and changes that are occurring constantly in this area.
Exactly, yes. How can fintech play a role in serving the underbanked and unbanked communities?
Well, I mean, a tremendous role, right? They can serve unbanked and the unbanked communities by lowering the cost of financial services and eliminating many of the friction points currently present in the banking system. Account balance minimums, overdraft fees, fees for sending small amounts of money, remittances. I'm here in the Caribbean, and other island nations rely so heavily on remittances, not just for individuals and for families, but also for businesses. And these fees are almost always paid by customers with the lowest balances. So lowering or eliminating fees generally increases access. And one can see these benefits today through the ability to hold and send digital dollar stable coins in digital wallets or smartphones and computers. These digital wallets do not charge fees to hold money, and one can use the blockchain network to send money for fractions of a cent. So particularly people of color, Black consumers and businesses can use these low friction, low fee networks to transact directly with each other without the need for the middleman like banks and payment processors that also have a history of discrimination against them. So we're hopeful that this is a way to allow Black innovation, Black entrepreneurs to be able to expand their networks, to lower the fees so that they can transact in a way that is much more facile for them.
What do you think of neobanks and banks that are operating online?
Of course, as a member of Congress, you have some, hesitancy when you hear about that, and more because we're always afraid of people being taken advantage of. And that's where the need and the desire to have some regulatory framework, some understanding of how they operate, I think is key. I think they do have a role to play, and they're helpful to many of the unbanked people who are innovators and entrepreneurs who do not have access to traditional banking. But at the same time, we're also concerned, we don't want them to become payday loans, right?
Right.
Where there are usury charges and those innovators are taken advantage of. Have you seen them operating successfully? Are there examples where you've seen that this has been done successfully, groups that are successful?
Well, the first Boulevard is the one that comes to mind, and the owner or the co-founder is both of them actually are African Americans, and they're working with some of the largest financial institutions in implementing it. It's in the early stage, but it's one example of a neobank. Let me move on to blockchain. This is an area that a lot of us in the academia are interested in. Where do you place blockchain among a range of innovations in the 21st century? And how long do you think it's going to be before mainstream adoption takes place?
Interesting. So when I first came to Congress in 2015, and I talked to my legislative team, and I'm like, guys, what about blockchain? It was completely blank looks on their faces as to what are you talking about? I had been introduced to the concept from friends that I worked with at McKinsey, right? Who from their financial services, we were part of a spin-off group from McKinsey in New York called the Mitchell-Madison Group. And they were just coming into blockchain and recognizing its potential. And so when I went to my staff and I was like, we really need to understand what this blockchain is and what it has the potential. And let's see about, let's see if there's even proposed legislation on this. Of course, at the time, you'll appreciate this. The members of Congress who had legislation on this were already millionaires in the technology field who had become members of Congress, right? So as members of Congress, of course, they have to have an arm's length, blind trust of their own assets and their funding, have gotten out of the space. So there was nothing nefarious about it. But the number of members who even were thinking about this were minuscule. And it was really just those who happened to have been engaged in this technology prior to becoming members of Congress. I believe blockchain has the potential to be one of the greatest technological innovations since the internet, right? Every day, entrepreneurs are developing new cases for technology. Many of the projects are open source. Meaning that the source code is public and available for download for free on the internet. Not only being open source that it's free, but this allows anyone with a new idea to build their new software on top of that previous release software or edit it to better suit the needs of new projects, right? All for free. With all of this software available, entrepreneurs will be able to build new applications and products without having to pay licensing fees, beholden to large tech companies for revenue streams, for each new application or product. So it allows to create opportunity for additional entrepreneurs to bring their ideas to fruition. To me, this is critically important, particularly for America, where our competitive edge is not through scale, but through innovation. We are the innovators. And blockchain, I believe, is going to allow Americans to continue that innovation competitiveness that allows us to continue to be great in areas of technology, areas of revenue creation, in our competitiveness against China, Russia, and other places as well. Over time, the exponential opportunity for innovation speed up the development of blockchain products. And that means that many blockchain-based services that are already part of our everyday lives will be part of our everyday lives by the end of the decade. Just as an example, during the COVID pandemic, members of Congress, those of us particularly in the blockchain caucus, a group of us, were requesting that Treasury and USDA utilize blockchain to support the distribution of funds. Not just stimulus checks, but in particular, funding to farmers, to underserved communities, for there to be an open source review of where that money was going, to create more transparency, as well as to ensure that there was a larger distribution of the funds that were available, whether that be for, the PPP, the support for small businesses that was there, support for farmers through farm, food box and distribution programs, as well as even for stimulus checks.
Are you aware of CFTC or any Treasury units experimenting with blockchain?
Not aware of it. I mean, when we suggested it during the last administration, we were summarily cut off. But I think that, listen, as we are reviewing this, President Biden's, particularly his American Jobs Plan, which is his infrastructure legislation, there are components that really blockchain would be ideal for. When we talk about, small businesses, contractors, innovators being able to secure contracts for some of these projects that are going to be needed for infrastructure development, blockchain could be a mechanism to allow those who have been left out of the procurement process to be brought in.
Very good. Great. Thank you. What recommendations now do you have for HBCU faculty and students?
So now you want me to tell you what to do?
Blockchain adoption. What do you think is important in a series of range of important topics And what do you think that might be helpful in getting our students ready for the future workforce?
Well, I mean, you all Morgan State are really a great model, right? Because your Center for the Study of Blockchain and Financial Technology offers introductory courses, workshop, grants for other HBCUs to train faculty and develop programs. And that cooperation between HBCUs, I think, particularly in this early stage, is really critical. Blockchain companies are hiring and want to partner with HBCUs to promote positions, career centers, alumni job boards, and to support students, virtual positions, non-technical roles, and entry-level opportunities. So most colleges and universities offer at least one blockchain course to meet the increasing demand, but it's important to have an interdisciplinary approach beyond just engineering schools, which expand the curriculum in fine arts and communication, international affairs. Those are all areas where blockchain can be utilized and can be a real support to students moving forward. I think it's something that we are going to have to integrate into so many aspects of learning as this technology becomes really intrinsic in so much of what's happening around the world. So, I hats off to Morgan State for being ahead of the curve on this. But I think it's, an opportunity, and particularly in the members of the Congressional Black Caucus had I can't even believe we've already passed it now, Tech 2020. Excuse me, where we were going to technology companies and really pressing them on what are your support to HBCUs? What is your recruitment at HBCUs? What training programs do you have? And at the same token, how many African Americans, how many people of color do you have in your C-suite? What is your commitment to increasing that? And, we're not just talking about soft areas, but operations, your CEOs, your CFOs, your COOs of your corporation, your CIOs. Are you even following the Rooney rule, right? Where you're interviewing a group of people, ensuring that at least one or two of those are African Americans in the recruitment process. So that's something that we had been pressing them on. And I think the universities utilizing blockchain technology and making that a part of the discussion is also critical to ensure that there's a holistic approach to ensuring that we're part of that innovation as it matures.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. We appreciate it. Congresswoman, if you allow us, we start the Q&A section at this time, and I'm requesting my colleague who is on the panel here, Dr. Sanjay Bapna, who's the chair of the Information Systems Department and also the associate director of the FinTech Center, to get the questions from the Q&A section and read them so that we can discuss them. Thank you so much. Sanjay?
Thank you, Congresswoman. The first question is actually from your congressional district. Professor Joan Luciano, do you see blockchain technology playing in the economic development of the US Virgin Islands? And are there any specific activities or groups in VI where interested parties can come together to discuss this technology in the context of this economic development?
Great question. And here in the Virgin Islands, we know that right at the university, a component of it, the Research and Technology Park, which offers tax incentives to technology companies, has within its portfolio several blockchain companies. tax. Individuals who are utilizing the Virgin Islands to operate blockchain companies, cryptocurrency companies. We've seen a lot of that in Puerto Rico. And we're really careful here in the Virgin Islands that individuals and companies can receive tax incentives if they reside in the Virgin Islands. So if you source your income if you are first, you get a certificate as an economic development company here, as a member of the Research and Technology Park. The Research and Technology Park takes a portion of your revenues, a very small percentage, and your services are there on the island and part of the Research and Technology Park group. And then these companies are able to, when they file their federal taxes, the income that they can source to the Virgin Islands gets a significant reduction in taxes, federal taxes, because they're in the Virgin Islands. And in lieu of that, we were requesting, the Virgin Islands government requests that a certain number of employees, a certain number of interns are locally hired, thus creating a knowledge base, reversing our brain drain, creating a greater knowledge base group, incentivizing entrepreneurship. So we know that, the Virgin Islands has some of the largest bandwidth capacity in the United States because Global Crossing buried its hub between North and South America on the island of St. Croix. So there is a capacity there for companies that are engaged in blockchain, cryptocurrency, tremendous amount, data storage, service companies here on the island. And so these companies, particularly at the Research and Technology Park, are creating synergy among themselves by being part of the park. Additionally, there's discussions about creating not incubators, but accelerators of businesses here, which would integrate with students, incentivizing students and other individuals to come back home after receiving degrees elsewhere to support that technology.
Thank you. We did provide funding to University of Virgin Island, and that funding was based on the use case was connecting farmers with restaurants.
Awesome.
Through
awesome.
Yeah.
That's, creating, we have so many, and I could see how blockchain can be helpful even to our local farmers. One of the things when I talk to the grocery store owners, to restaurant owners, is there's not synergy among the farmers to recognize what the needs are of our hotels, of our restaurants, of our grocery stores. So we have multiple farmers all growing cucumbers rather than groups growing arugula or cucumber, tomatoes, so that there's a cycle at which all of the needs of the different, the suppliers as well as the supply and the demand side are met for a range of products that our farmers can be doing. That would dispel the need even for cooperatives if they were all part of a blockchain unit to be able to do that.
Blockchain is so disruptive, and thanks for bringing that to our attention. The next question relates again to the funding aspect, and in this case, it's funding from government. So has there been any discussion on government offering training and incentive programs for the diverse communities to build blockchain-based businesses?
There are always proposals by members of Congress in multiple areas about offering training and incentives. One of the things that we note that the president is proposing in this American Jobs Plan is $100 billion to job training, to create jobs among our young Americans outside of traditional manufacturing. And there has been, just yesterday, or day before, I was on a call with the Black Economic Council and other Black members of the Ways and Means Committee. The Ways and Means Committee in Congress is the one who is going to be tasked with about 70% of this bill, of drafting 70% of this bill. There are 6 members of Congress who are Black and sit on the Ways and Means Committee. We've been meeting together to say, listen, this is an opportunity where we have got to direct funding to underserved people of color, Black communities who have not been able to win when we have this. We saw that in the ARA funding, right? The American Recovery Reinvestment Act. Tremendous billions of dollars were circulated, but very few companies, true minority companies. And I'll go out on a limb and say, I'm not talking about, white women-owned companies that then claim that they're minority companies and get substantial funding, but when they're really their husband's companies, right? Or they're the figurehead, but truly companies run by minorities that we've got to direct funding at that. And the discussion, Professor, was that technology, as the president recognizes that we have got to go to clean energy sources, think about climate change, revamp our thinking about what jobs are, to IT, to more sophisticated technology, that this is an area, one, blockchain, that funding could go towards, and making sure that a certain percentage of that funding, that 100 billion, goes to underserved areas and underserved communities as well.
That's 100 billion. Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct, with a B.
With a B, okay. Great. You had mentioned innovation, Barriers to Innovation Act. And so there's a question related somewhat to that. And I know that you also mentioned you look at what existing countries are doing in the blockchain crypto space. So the question from Jason Neal is, are you currently monitoring the Caribbean Currency Union? That's the pilot program in the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
And while you're monitoring these different countries, what they're doing, can you just describe the process?
Well, I know that the Financial Services Committee, which has oversight over banking and treasury, which is run by Congresswoman Maxine Waters, has had a number of meetings with CARICOM nations about issues of, of banking issues that they have, with treasury and others, whether that be being placed on blacklist, issues of remittances, issues of being unable to, get banking done between the United States and some of these other programs. So I'm not sure the extent to which cryptocurrency issues are are part of that discussion, but I have heard them in the meetings that I've been mentioned, that this may in fact be a mechanism for these banks to expand their ability to have reciprocity with American banking systems.
Thank you. There's a question from Michael Ligons, an MBA student at Morgan State University. Can Black members of Congress, that is, I'm assuming the Congressional Black Caucus, create a consortia to keep the next generation of thought leaders at HBCUs engaged? And Michael feels that there's a huge disconnect between the two parties. That is, the thought leaders at HBCUs and maybe the Congressional Black Caucus.
Well, I think, a consortium might be an interesting way. One of the things that COVID has created such a disconnect in a lot of ways for our annual legislative week, which usually takes place in September. We have thought leaders come to Washington and create symposiums that they partner with members of Congress. So say I'm on the Judiciary Committee and I'll partner with thought leaders on criminal justice reform, or I'm on the Financial Services Committee and I'll talk with community bank, thought leaders on community banking, et cetera, and have forums in that respect. But we also have regularly during our weekly Wednesday lunches, have individuals come and talk with us about areas that they think are important, and members of Congress as well asking questions. We talk about legislation, how we can be supportive. And so in that respect, I think that there is back and forth, but for the most part, members of Congress are always really interested in legislating. And there's just frankly an overload of individuals who want to be influencers and who are always coming to us with new ideas. And how to funnel that is always really a difficult question. I have to tell you that the people, even outside of members of Congress, who are the most important people to get in front of are chiefs of staffs, our legislative directors. Members of Congress rely on these professionals within our staff to present new ideas, to present proposed legislation, things that may be interesting, that are within the members' bandwidth or within their wheelhouse of knowledge or committee assignments or constituent concerns that members should be thinking about. So often professionals and outside groups want to meet with members of Congress, when in truth, the real influencers are professional staff on committees, along with legislative directors and chiefs of staff. I think it would be a great idea for HBCUs to engage with the Congressional Black Caucus Chief of Staffs, who meet regularly, weekly with one another, as well as with the legislative directors as well.
Very good advice. Thank you so much. And this is going to conclude our questions and answers session.
Well, I think, Sanjay, there may be some additional questions posted. No? Okay.
No, we were told this would be the last question.
Okay.
From Congresswoman Plaskett's office.
Okay.
I actually just went through all of the Q&A and we got all of them.
We got
all of them.
Yes. Okay. Very good. Very good. Thank you. I have one last question, Congresswoman, if you allow me.
Make it a good one.
It's a relationship between the federal and state, and what is the role of federal when it comes to blockchain, crypto, and what is the role of the states? Some states are more advanced, Wyoming, for instance, in terms of crypto adoption, and also opening it up for people to come in and set up shop, so to speak. But what is that relationship? Is there something that can be done to facilitate it and make it easier for other states to get involved?
I think that there's always tension between even members of Congress as to concern over, federal overreach in comparison to states. And, you as you said, there is a range of regulatory frameworks in each one of the states. And some of us, like myself, believe that there needs to be a ground set by the federal government that cuts across all of the states, so that we do not have huge disparities in regulatory frameworks between the states. Yes, we want states to be able to compete with each other, and that does allow for some competitiveness, but we also don't want people gaming the system. And so that's why particularly members of the Blockchain Caucus are really trying to push for some regulatory framework at a federal level, so that companies have at least, four corners within which they need to regulate and observe the the rules of the game, right? Rules moving forward. However, up until this last year, even legislation that we just have, a backlog of legislative activity in Congress. You saw that last year, Congress, the House side, because we are bicameral system, becomes even more difficult. On the House side, there were over 400, almost 500 bills that were passed in the House that were never taken up by the Senate. And therefore you don't get you can't come up with a regulatory framework. Over 200 of those bills that were passed in the House were bipartisan. Both Democrats and Republicans supported them, that were never taken up by the US Senate, and therefore were not then given to the president to become law. We're hoping that we, can include a lot of this innovation and thoughts in some of these 3 bills that will go through reconciliation. And that will allow, people are tacking on lots of other, the American Rescue Plan, which was the COVID bill, now the American Jobs Plan, which is the infrastructure bill. And then just this past week, the president introducing the American Family Plan, which is related to, paid leave, childcare, permanency to the child tax credit. All of those will move through reconciliation, which means that the Senate needs a mere majority. You can imagine, think of those as like whales making their way through. And every member of Congress is trying to create their favorite legislation as a barnacle on that whale, so it can carry those other pieces of legislation as well. Will that be successful? We'll see what Congress believes is necessary and what is not. And the sieve and the cleaner of those barnacles is always the Senate. Taking off what is, they in their minds to mean, not necessary and expedient and relevant to the major legislation. And then those things are sifted out through reconciliation. When you have 2 different versions in the House and the Senate of legislation, they're brought into conference. Then, we create a bill which is similar in scope to each other, and it's revoted again. And then that's sent to the president.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Congresswoman, for a fascinating and informative discussion.
Thank you. May I just one thing?
Absolutely.
I see that you have a student, and I do want to make sure that I answer this question. You have an Akeem Myers, who's a senior finance major at Morgan State, who's interested about a law school with a BS in finance. I have to tell you, I think that is a great undergraduate degree to go into law school, particularly for those who are interested in transactional law. Those are lawyers who deal mostly in the corporate space with deal making, with contracts, mergers, acquisitions, etc. Because so often many lawyers do not have that background when they then are taken up by these major firms and work on these deals. Law school, I tell anybody, do not get a bachelor's in pre-law. That's a waste of time. Get your bachelor's in something that you love, something that you're passionate about, whether it's economics, finance. Myself, it was history. And law school is about logic, reasoning, and reading and writing. That's what you're going to learn in law school. So whatever your undergraduate degree, the great thing about the law is that there is a range of opportunities to practice law that are not just related to being in the courtroom. Right? Whether that's, individuals who have engineering backgrounds who become patent lawyers, to those who have finance backgrounds who end up working in mergers and acquisitions, writing derivatives, or in transactional law, supporting contract writing and others. Okay? I just want to make sure I take care of the students.
Yeah. Well, there's another one. There's a question from Caleb at another university, Hudson Tillotson, one of our HBCUs. It's related to NFTs and smart contracts. What use cases do you recommend?
I don't. I'm not really very aware of that and can't really tell you what might be the best. But Caleb, you can always call our office at, the number is 202-225-1790 and ask to speak with someone in our legislative team, and they can support you and try and come up with the answer. One of the other great things about law school is it allows you the ability to say what you don't know and move on from there.
Wonderful. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the questions from students and the faculty, administrators. The recording, by the way, we mentioned it, it's going to be available on our website, fintech.morgan.edu. But this concludes the session of the National HBCU Blockchain Webinar Series that the FinTech Center organized. And again, I want to say that we are grateful to the Congresswoman Stacey Plaskett for sharing some valuable information with us. Be well. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.